Hi, I'm Jennifer Cabic with Silver Peanut, and today I'm going to do a fun project for a summer necklace using copper pipe and ice resin. I want to go over a couple of the supplies that you're going to need to gather first. These are the supplies you're going to need to get started. You can get your copper pipe and this nice little pipe cutter from your local hardware store. They have various sizes, diameters of copper pipe you can use. I like using 1/4 inch diameter, and this one here is about a 3/4 inch diameter. You're going to need a circle template, some sharp scissors, some rice paper with inclusions, some copper jump rings, some solder paste. I use Easy Solder, Susan Leonard Casimir's ice resin, some rhinestones, and your cutters. I've cut some of my copper pipe with the pipe cutter, and now I'm ready to solder on my jump ring. So I have one of the pieces of copper pipe in my tweezers. I'm going to take the jump ring and I'm going to get it set up to solder where I want it to go on my pipe. Now make sure you use safety precautions when using the solder paste. I have a piece of copper wire that I flattened out at the end to make it easier for me to apply the paste where I want it to go. I have my micro torch that I'm going to heat up a little bit because it makes it easier for the solder to adhere. Heat it up just a little bit. Now I'm careful where I'm putting my solder, right by the jump ring and by the pipe. And I'm going to heat it up just till I see the solder flow. I'm going to hold the flame on the copper pipe and heat that up. I'm not going to hold it on the jump ring because my jump ring will melt. There, it flows really quick because it is the Easy Solder. I'm going to release the jump ring and I'm going to quench it in water. Now we're ready to move on to the next step of our project. Now that I have my copper pipe ready with the jump rings, I've used a couple different applications on a couple of them just to make a variety. It's nice to do this step where you do several at once, because then that way when you mix up your resin, you'll have enough resin to fill up enough pieces. I've made one here oblong, and how I did that is after I've heated it, before I put the jump ring on, I squeezed the center of it with some pliers and it made an oblong shape. Then on these here, I etched the sides of the pipe. And this one here, I use the Art Mechanic cold enamels. So I have a couple different finishes to them. So now I'm going to prepare to fill my bezels. I have some that I've pre-filled so I could show you the different steps. What I want to do first is I have some shelf liner paper that has adhesive backing. It comes in a big roll you can get at the store. I've cut off a section. I'm going to peel the back off. You can also use packing tape. I like to use this because it doesn't leave so much marking on the back. And I get this styrofoam from the craft store, and I find putting my pieces on here, it allows for easier pouring of the resin because you can push the jump ring into the styrofoam a little bit and you get more of a level surface for pouring, and it won't leak out as much. Now what I'm going to do is I have some resin that I've already poured and I pre-mixed so I could let the bubbles release, and you let it sit for about 5 minutes after you push it out of the ice resin plunger. You stir it and let it sit for about 5 minutes. It'll release most of the bubbles. You're going to take your stir stick after you push your copper onto the adhesive backing, and you're just going to put a little layer in, because these are all going to be backless so you can see through them, and you're just going to put a little bit of resin in and let it cure so you have a backing. I like to do all of mine in layers, so it takes a couple days for this process because I do a layer, I let it cure, then I add my inclusions, I let it cure, and then I top it off and I have the top domed. So I have that piece, and that's how I get my first layer in. I just put a couple drops in. I'll set this aside. The ones that I've already had cured, I want to measure the circle. So I take my circle guide and I hold it over to see which circle would be best to cut my piece out to. I'm going to take my handmade paper with the dried skeleton leaves in it, and I'm going to use that circle. And just draw it on there. I'm going to take my scissors, and what I like to do for this part is I cut this out. It's easier to work with a smaller piece. And I'm going to cut right inside that ink line, so you're not going to see the ink. And this can be tricky. If it's a little bit larger, you can always cut some more away. And it might take a couple times to get just the size you need. And this should fit very nicely into my circle. So I have this ready, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to prepare pieces for each of the others. Okay, so now I have all of my handmade paper with the skeleton leaf included in it, all cut out to size. What I'm going to do is take my ice resin, I'm going to put a little bit down in the bottom of each copper bezel. Just a little drop in the little tiny ones, and then in the bigger ones a little bit more. And what this does is it helps adhere the paper into the bottom, and you won't get so many bubbles coming up to the surface if you don't put anything underneath it. Works a little better if you have some resin down first. So I have my resin down now. I'm going to take my tweezers for the tiny ones and pick up the paper. Now these you could either have them laying flat, you could push, I have a little a straight pin here, you could either push it down into the resin. If you want it tilted a little bit, that makes for a nice effect because you're going to be able to see through this because there is no back on any of the bezels. Now because this paper is handmade, I did not put any kind of sealant on it. It's going to become a little transparent, so really all you're going to be able to see is that little skeleton leaf. Okay, all the paper is put into the copper pieces. Now I have my rhinestone chain. I grabbed a strand of it and I dipped it in liver sulfur to oxidize it to really give it a nice difference in color. So you could either leave your chain shiny or you could oxidize it. I do a little bit of both. In the bigger round ones, I am going to put the chain in. I'm just going to lay it in. And it's a little bit too big, so I'm just going to take my cutters and snip it, and then I'm just going to take my tweezers and lay it in there. Now for the tiny ones, I'm going to put in a little more resin. On top of that paper. Pick up the stone with tweezers and I'm just going to plop it in there. Make sure that the stone's facing up. And I want to have them more towards the center so you can see them pretty good. You'll have to clean your tweezers off after you do this. I usually have one pair of tweezers that I use specifically for resin. Now I'm going to fill these up with resin. And I'm just going to take my stick and I'm going to get to the point where I want it to dome up. So I'm going to totally fill that, but not so it spills over, just so I see it doming. And this is nice because most of the bubbles are gone. And it's starting to set, so it's a little bit slower to move, which makes it easier to fill up the bezels too. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to let these set. Once you've filled all of your bezels, you could add anything like the handmade paper I added, the rhinestones, vintage paper, transparencies with words on it. Get it to how you like it, and then all you need to do is let it cure for 24 hours, add your chain, and there you have it. You've got a nice everyday summer necklace you can wear. Thanks.